Good afternoon, everyone. I like to call to order the meeting of the Board of Supervisors to discuss our budget for February 19th, 2019. We only have a 3 p.m. session tonight. As usual, we will start the meeting with an invocation led tonight by Ms. Lascolette, and then followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mr. Peterson. Please
You'll stand if you're able. Okay. Most gracious God, thank you for enabling us to gather here today. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to serve this great county. Now, as we go about doing the business set forth today, help us to keep you first in everything that we say and do. Bless all of us with the proper knowledge, wisdom, and understanding so that we all may prosper. Most of all, bind us together in a spirit of love which surpasses all things. It is in your most holy name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On today's agenda, we don't have a public comment period listed, but I will go ahead and open it for public comment if anyone would like to speak up about any topic important to Goochland. Okay, it's closed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jonathan Lau. I'm here as a Monacan Soil and Water Conservation Director. I just want to again iterate, we appreciate very much the space that we've been afforded in the Cultural and Agricultural Center out on Docktown Road. Mr. Stamey, we have made our first payment. I hope the check did not bounce. We're good. Okay, so I do appreciate that. I've also communicated with you folks regarding the vacancy we have in the extension, agricultural extension position. Our agent who had been with us since 2015 is now in South Carolina with, I believe, her fiance. And so we have a position that's open there. It is a Virginia Extension position, and they have a hiring process that is convoluted, I guess, in some respects, and they've just changed that. But I have heard that if there is an outreach from the locality, sometimes that process of replacing or adding or filling that position is expedited a little bit. And I won't get into detail, but my understanding there are some folks already who are interested in doing an internal transfer, but because of the process they have to go through. So if you haven't received those letters, I'd be happy to send them again. But it would be, I think, a benefit to the ag industry here in Goochland if we had that position filled. We also, and I was speaking with Ms. Bird just beforehand, I understand that the budget for the Soil and Water Conservation District as the county approaches it has changed somewhat. Logistically, I want to go on record that if there's any information that we can provide, we'd be happy to do it. I also want to go on record that if, as you are considering the budget, there are more pressing needs in public safety, education, and transportation, we'll suck it up. We'll figure it out. Please take care of the top priorities from my position. So my other directors may not appreciate me saying that, so that's an individual comment, not necessarily for the whole board. Now I'm going to switch my hat a little bit in that there's a lot of conversation on affordable housing, and I have been listening to and hearing some of the rezoning requests, and Mr. Lumpkins challenged me 2 meetings ago is define rural. And I would be interested if we can define affordable housing. You know, I spent some time in the banking industry, and we had a ratio of 30% of household income going towards just housing costs. So I'm not sure if there is a definition of what we're trying to get to when we say affordable housing. And I went so far as to look at what a $300,000 house would be, what a $400,000 house would be, 4%, 3% mortgage rates, and you know, it's all over the board. But just as a citizen who is interested in seeing deputies, teachers, first responders, farmers being able to stay here in the county, if we can get some definitions on affordable housing, I'm more than happy to come up with opinions as to what we might best do on some of these rezoning requests. So the light hasn't gone off, so Ms. Beskowitz either is feeling kind today or she is feeling kind today. And I have learned not to overstep a kindness, so I'll just...
You got extra time for all those nice compliments you gave us last week.
Well, I mean, foreshadow, I will be traveling for your April meeting, so I have to get my licks in here during the February budget meeting. So I'll be here for March, but I won't be here for April. So just don't get upset.
Thank you, Mr. Lyle. Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment period. So the next item on the agenda is my comments, and I just have a brief one, but I'd like to start by saying that today you're going to get the first view into our county administrator's proposed budget, and you're going to see the sheriff's proposal and fire and EMS. But over the next few weeks, you'll get the full picture, and you can, obviously between now and then, you can provide us input on anything you hear. But the town hall meetings are coming up, and that's a great venue for seeing what's being proposed, where we are today, and providing feedback so that by the time we come back to approve the budget at the hearing in April, that you've been able to provide us information. And we'll hold the hearing at the time and can give us more information then, but it may be, I think a great opportunity is the town hall meetings. So with that, the districts 2 and 3 combined town hall meeting will be March 13 at 7 p.m. at Central High School on Dogtown Road. District 1 will be March 18th at 7 p.m. at Firehouse Station 4. The last few have been at Station 6. This will be at Station 4?
We switch.
Okay. So then Districts 4 and 5 will be March 27th at 7 p.m. at Hermitage Country Club. So please try to make one or make them all. It's interesting sometimes to hear the different concerns of people in the different districts. With that, I think we go right into new business today. And Mr. Budeski is going to take us through the county administrator's proposed budget for 2020.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It is my honor as your county administrator to present to you the county administrator's proposed FY20 budget. We will also be sharing with you recommendations not only for the 20 budget, the 5-year CIP, and the 25-year CIP, and so we'll be discussing that broader product here today. I would like to thank, first and foremost, the finance team, Barbara and her team, for all the effort that goes into putting this budget together and having it balanced here to present to you today. Also, this is a broader team effort. I'd like to welcome members of our school board here. I saw Mr. Hazard, Ms. Horn, Dr. Raley's here, senior staff, our constitutional officers, and all of the county departments to be able to bring to you a budget of this size and magnitude with the diversity of services that we provide to our constituents. It takes a lot of folks working together. We have a great team here in Goochland that is committed to bringing you a budget that's based on your conservative principles, but yet meeting the demands of our constituents on the service side. And so today I'm pleased to present that to you. As we have done over the past several years, we have moved all of our budget hearings into this room. So we will be recording all of the budget presentations and sharing them with our citizens who could not make it here today, but all of the documents, and there are a lot of them. We provided the book to the board today. It is about 1.5 inches, 2 inches thick, of all of the department budgets. They are all going to be available on the county website preceding today's meeting, and will be available for public input and review. That does include all of the county departments, all the constitutional offices, and our school board requests. Our budget is laid out in a format that you'll be able to see what some historical spending, some of what the requests of the departments, and what the county administrators recommended is. And so with that, I'd like to kick off the process to share with you a little bit of what we've done. We're going to go through a soup to nuts sort of overview of the county budget process. I just hate when I have friends in the room to be having my back turned to you, so I'm going to sort of stand a little sideways because this is really a team effort for us as we move through this process. And so my introduction to the budget is a high-level summary of the top priorities that we have embedded into the budget recommendations for the year. We will also discuss some of the things. I think it's important for you to also have a perspective on what we were unable to fund. There are a number of requests that far exceed our ability when we're looking to balance a budget for you. But it's important for you to know that on different departments, we work best with them to prioritize those needs, but there are always some needs that go unmet in a recommendation to you. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about how we ended up with both from the revenue perspective and the expenditure perspective. How are we in a position to do the priorities that we were able to recommend to you this year? As always, our board plan is consistent with, and recommendations in the county administrator's budget is consistent with the Board of Supervisors' strategic plan. We're also going to talk, and you'll hear us talk about a general fund and a utilities fund. The general fund is primarily what is generated by the property taxes and general local taxes. Our overall fund includes revenues also from non-local expenditures, and we'll talk about the utility fund. We refer to that as an enterprise fund because it operates more like a business and is offset by its own revenues and expenditures, quite different than the rest of how we do the county budget. So just wanted to give a little bit of perspective of how we even got here today. Every day we're out meeting with our constituents and our department professionals. We are looking to understand what are the challenges residents are facing, what are the service needs that they're requesting, what is the climate that they're facing. You know, some of our residents have means in our community, not that they are not conservative in nature, but we also have residents that are really challenged just to meet the day-to-day expenditures. So when we're looking at this budget, we have to look at that full gamut of ability, but we also have to look at the need. We want to make sure when that 911 is called, we have individuals to respond. We want to make sure we have a community that's well educated. We want to make sure that we can meet the rest of the service needs for our residents, and that is a real balance. And so that listening process really serves us well. We've stayed up here that the process starts in October. It really starts the day after we'll adopt this budget for next year. We're always looking year round, but formally we request to the departments and constitutional officers in the schools. We work with them beginning really in October in earnest, and then that rolls out to whenever I can introduce this budget here with you today. And you can see we've met with all of the entities that I'd mentioned earlier and spent a fair amount of time not only understanding their requests, but going back to them and saying, here's what we're able to recommend, and make sure we've aligned their priorities with my recommendation. I don't want to make sure that I'm speaking on behalf of an entity that's not consistent at the end of the day, and if it wouldn't be consistent, I feel it's my job to share that with you. We always look for opportunities to create efficiencies. One of the goals the board gave us always is look to see how we can do things more efficient and more effective, but we started with a do not eliminate current service level goal. And so there's a balance. So when we can, we try to look at efficiencies in operations. As we are a growing community, some of those services are really hard to constrain, and in this budget you'll see where we're able to try to contain some of those and where we're actually recommending some service enhancements. And there are a number that you'll see here when we discuss the budget today. One of our priorities as a community are really public safety and public education, and then we sort of round it out with every other service that we provide. You're going to see that there is an expanded service level recommended in our fire and rescue services. The demands continue to grow. We're going to talk about that. And certainly our principles of strong financial management. We start with those and really build upon the rest of the budget there. Our employees are the base of what serves our residents, which is the majority of our operating budget, and you're going to see that we're trying to maintain competitiveness for our employees, and you'll see that throughout the county recommendations. One of the things that the board has challenged us with, and we've been doing over a number of years, is reducing our dependency on prior year fund balance. And you're going to see by over another $500,000 that we're reducing that dependency in this recommended budget to you today. Our rates are self-sustaining for utilities. As I said earlier, it's a revenue expenditure model, more like a business in utilities, a little different than general government accounting. And you're going to see a number of tax reform related priorities in this budget. We really looked across the gamut of taxes that our businesses and residents pay throughout Goochland County, and made some sound recommendations that we think will help spur some additional investment in our community and help some of those most in need in our community as well. Let's just talk a little bit about the basis of some of the revenue side of how are we positioned to be able to meet the demands. Forever, we always talk and we tout, and we're very proud of our low tax rate. But how do we really provide the service level demands that our residents desire and deserve? And so really, the way we're able to do that is the balance of revenues that we have coming into the county. We have seen great investment in commercial and capital investment. You're going to see some of that growth in some further slides. But when we have that kind of investment, that dependency on our residential tax base is dramatically reduced, but yet still bringing in new revenues to meet the service demands for our community. On a job growth basis and on a percentage basis, Goochland County for a number of years has had the highest job growth percentage in the Commonwealth. And you would think that's consistent because we are seeing those additional investments in commercial entities, and it is aligning. We're almost 10% higher than the next closest jurisdiction in our region on pure job growth on a percentage basis. And as you can imagine, Goochland County shares in the Commonwealth itself as having a very low unemployment rate right now. Goochland County is seeing that same under 3% unemployment rate. Median family income, we are the second highest median family income in the Commonwealth. And that is great when you're looking at promoting economic development kinds of things. But it's also balanced. While we have a median income of 86, we also have a lot of folks that don't make quite that much at all, not even half of it. And so I need to be sensitive to those good numbers when we're promoting them for one purpose, but never forgetting the balance. Here's that assessed valuation. Just in the past year, we have grown our commercial base over 1% of our total assessed valuation. That is massive for a community to be able to make a 1% leap here. From an investment. And we have new projects that will be coming on in the years to come that should grow this even more. We are always trying to figure out how do we balance our economic development investments for our community, spur that development in the areas we intend it to go. One of our goals is clearly protecting that balance of rural nature of our community. And this really is showing in our analysis that those investments are happening where we wanted them to go. They're going where we made investments in utilities and where our comprehensive land use plan has designated that growth. And we're seeing solid returns on those investments. And that growth actually reduces the overall burden throughout the entire county. And so we've seen some major growth there. Our median home values continues to be one of the strongest in the region. At $327,000, Goochland's median home price. Again, it's a great statistic from an economic development standpoint and certainly is reflective of the market of sales in our community, one of the highest in the region. But there are a lot of individuals in our community that, again, can't afford a home in that price range, and we have to be sensitive to those needs. Our building and permits just from 2012 to 2018 is up over 50%, 51%. And so those kinds of investments in building is returning some funds that we're allowed to look at the service sides and demands of our residents. I'm going to start moving into the budget recommendation for you here, and I really hope that the takeaway for those watching or with us today is we're making some very clear investments in our priorities. You're going to see that we really extended ourselves to support public safety, supporting public education, our top two priorities as a community. You're also going to see where we've made some other investments where we know we have individuals of need. We've made some recommendations in this budget to try to address some of those concerns. We're also doing some other tax changes and fees that should help spur business investment, entrepreneurship, and increase business expansion in our community. What you're seeing here is our all funds budget. This budget includes the total, not only general fund, as I mentioned earlier, but it includes all the state and federal funds that we receive in fees and such. It's an $87.5 million total budget. You will note that this budget is several $1 million less than last year's budget. And just to be clear, part of the reason for that is last year's capital improvement plan was more expansive than this current year. That's not going to be consistent in the 5-year because we have some major investments in the 5-year. But our overall budget is down over prior year, primarily in the area of capital improvement. Real estate tax rate. The board has clearly given direction to recommend to bring a budget today that does not include a real estate tax increase. We've been able to be consistent with that in the past several years. I do want to be clear that that does not mean that we did not see growth in property values in Goochland County in the past year. We actually did see about a 6+% overall growth. That's generally consistent with the Richmond region, especially outside the city, that we're seeing those kinds of growth. While we're holding the real estate tax rate firm at 53 cents, that doesn't, some individuals may pay more or less in the community in the year to come. Those funds help offset the service demands that we'll be recommending to you amongst other revenues. We've seen growth in a number of other areas. Our general fund revenue side of the overall budget, you can see real property taxes drive the majority of the revenue that comes in here. We also look at our personal property taxes, which we've seen really sound growth that's been sustained over a few years. We're always cautious when you see sort of a spike in revenues that you want to be able to sustain it. We've actually seen sustained growth in those areas. Our budget recommendations are always conservative, so we never really look, we try to make sure that we find the level area of revenue growth, not really looking at the peaks nor the valleys. So we really want to be cautious as we do some of these revenue projections. You can see the balance of all the other funds. One thing I do like to point out on this slide is we're only 11% dependent on state and federal revenue. Many other jurisdictions in the region are north of 20% or higher. And so for us, as we look at developing a budget, sometimes you're always worried, what's the state doing, and are they going to adopt their budget on time, and what's that mean for us? And if the federal government does adopt a budget, when they adopt a budget, we don't really worry about those funds too dramatically here in Goochland County. They are influencers. They are, I don't want to say they're unsubstantial amounts of funds, but we can still serve our residents tomorrow should those funding sources not adopt appropriately. And so we really try to make sure that we're taking care of ours. And that's sort of one of those things that it's sort of a nice position to be in when you're not that dependent on those revenues. But what it does mean is you're more dependent on your local revenues because of those formulas that we're forced on state and federal funds. But it also does allow us to avoid service interruptions for the most part. The capital improvement plan, one of the things we introduced last year in support with all of our constitutional officers and the school board, we introduced a 25-year capital improvement plan for Goochland County. I'm unaware of anyone else in the Commonwealth that's doing that. I know some that are starting it this year now because we did it last year, but the closest was 10-year. And our capital improvement plan includes the things that that we need to make sure that we're identifying early. We build a new building, there's lifespans to different parts of those buildings. How do we plan for those in the future? Our fleets, making sure that we're planning for proper replacement of fleets, recognizing when we would outgrow particular facilities and planning appropriately for those potential needs and or renovations in the future. And the capital improvement plan for the 25 years, and it's a large number, $561 million. But we're not being realistic with ourselves if we're not at least calling these items out, which allows us to do better long-term planning. You will see transportation as a substantial component of this at 45%. Many of the funds for transportation are federal and state. So the CIP is a little different than our operational side, but we do show the total cost of projects. You can see that where we have planned investments primarily where our priorities are in public safety and education, and they are consistent with our goals for the community. We will identify different opportunities where we will dive into the full capital improvement plan over the weeks and months to come, where we'll get into each category of government and the planned expenditures. My recommendation is generally consistent with last year's introduced capital improvement plan. There are some changes to that, and we will discuss that. I will point out some other requests that we were not able to support in my recommendation as we go through the presentation today, but there is time to have those discussions in this process. The 2020 capital improvement plan includes about $5.1 million of projects, and we'll explain them, but you can see how they're broken down here. A lot of the projects in the next year capital improvement plan are those kinds of things that sustain our vehicle replacements and maintenance, heavy maintenance items, lots of HVAC kind of improvements and When you start looking at fire and rescue apparatus and equipment, those kinds of things add up very quickly. We are making investments in those particular areas in the capital improvement plan, and I'll go into a little more detail when we get into the goal sections. So let's talk, here, in the next number of slides, we're going to talk about the board's 5 strategic goals and some of the major investments that we're doing in the recommended budget to you. There are a number of tax changes that we're doing. I want to start first with one of the recommendations in the county administrator proposed budget is to reduce the overall personal property tax rate by 5 cents. This would affect every personal property taxpayer, including businesses in Goochland County that pay. Currently, we're at $4 per hundred. This is a 5-cent reduction, and that has a larger impact across the board to all of our taxpayers. We also benchmark ourselves when we're looking at taxes. By far, our property real estate tax rate is by far the lowest in the region. We also benchmark ourselves on personal property and felt that this was an appropriate reduction to recommend in this year's budget. We talked about earlier taking care of those most in need. Our program for the elderly and disabled has not changed in the amount that we provide in support to the elderly and disabled in our community in a number of years. This budget increases that relief by $100, going from the $800 amount to up to $900 beginning next fiscal year. We're also establishing a personal property tax rate for disabled veterans, those who have given selfishly in service to our community and country. We are actually reducing the current rate by 50% in establishment of a $2 per hundred rate versus the $4, and yes, it would be slightly under 50 if the board would adopt the $3.95 rate. Now I want to spend a little bit of time talking about some major tax reform that we are proposing on the business license side of the county. Today, if you have a business in the county, a small business in particular, if you over $4,000, you have to pay, under $4,000, you get a free business license. We're actually expanding that to up to $10,000 in the recommended budget. We're also increasing that you would only, between $10,000 and $50,000, only have to pay for the business license. After $50,000, you would pay at the taxable rate. But keep in mind, everyone was paying that over the $4,000 amount in the past. And so this is a major change for small business in our community. And we're hoping that this is one opportunity to spur further investments and expansions. We are also proposing to create a tax rate for data centers and create Goochland County as a potential data center destination. Our current personal property tax rate is $4 for data centers, and we're proposing 40 cents. So, and this is consistent with what some of our neighboring jurisdictions are doing, and we wanted to position ourselves to potentially be a destination for these investments as well. One of the things I'm really proud that we were able to do with the support of the county attorney's office and Christina, one of the pieces that we are introducing as part of the budget this year is a transparent fee schedule. Right now, if you go to look at what's the fees for the county, you have to dig through the county's ordinances. Now you will be able to go to sort of a one-stop shop and see all the different fees for all the departments clearly delineated. This is a change from what we've done before, but we believe it's more transparency and will serve our constituents even better. Another area that's been a question that I think most of us that are engaging in public deal with every day is the vehicle license fee. And I dare say the treasurer and commissioner more than anybody. This budget does propose elimination of the vehicle license fee. I think it's only fair for me also to say that there will be a different assessment methodology used. So right now, if you go to file your taxes at the end of the year, that $30 vehicle license fee, you can't write any of that off. Under the new assessment methodology, whatever you're paying for your vehicle, your entire amount will be able to be written off as part of the tax process. I don't claim to be a tax filer, but I do understand that that $30 was uneligible for consideration in years prior. The other question that when not hearing about business license fee is how are you supporting internet in your community? And one of the means and mechanisms to support internet and cell tower expansion in our community is the addition of additional towers. We're not proposing to get rid of conditional use permits. We don't want to put towers where people don't want them, and that process through conditional use allows for the public to come in and engage in that. We are reducing the fee dramatically here and able to encourage those investments in those towers. The process for public engagement will still be there, but it's our belief that as we can get additional towers to support the capacity for cell expansion and wireless internet provision, we can have better service to our residents. Another fee, and this one we actually came to you about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, the peddler's fees. Again, to try to support business expansion and investment, we are reducing the peddler's fee in the proposed budget to you as well. And those are primarily, when I refer to peddlers, they're small businesses. Most people will think of the food trucks or the one-time kind of businesses that pop into Goochland. But many of them are Goochland citizens trying to expand a business out of a home, trying to expand a business into a storefront or brick and mortar kind of structure. And we recommended a reduction in those fees. One of the few fees that actually is projected to increase, and there's a good reason for it, is as we open the new animal adoption center, we haven't modified the fee slightly to incorporate spay and neuter in every animal that will leave the shelter. And so that is one of our goals, and we've been consistent with that. Another area that we plan to make investments, and these are continued investments. Those that have come to visit our building, we redid the community development offices, we redid the assessor's office, we redid the IT offices. We're making further investments. We plan to tackle the old extension office in the rear of the building. We plan to tackle the Commissioner of Revenue and Treasurer space and others, all in an effort to continue to make sure that we're providing a customer service environment for our residents that is most engaging, as well as supports the operational and functionality needs of departments. So we plan to make continued investments in this particular area. You heard me earlier talk about maintaining Goochland County as a rural community. Our comprehensive land use plan says that we plan to keep about 85% of the county rural. I think Mr. Lyle challenged us to also define rural earlier. But for us, one of the ways that we do that, not only through our land use planning side, but we continue to support our land use program. You may or may not know that 50+% of the property in Goochland County is in a land use program. That supporting that program within Goochland County protects not only the 50% of the land, but reduces the taxable benefit that those landowners would have to pay in otherwise. And that amounts for us is over $3 million. And we've been consistent in our support for this program. It allows these individuals to maintain their land in more of an agricultural state in different levels, but it does defer $3.1 million of taxes that we would otherwise collect if we did not have that program. But we've been committed to that program to support our rural nature. Let's talk about some of the investments. And I'm going to get into the schools here in a little bit more. But in the school's 5-year capital improvement plan, as I'm introducing it, it includes $40 million of investment. The largest expenditure in that is a new Goochland Elementary School. Amongst many other improvements and investments in the school system. Our transportation program has about $11.3 million of investments, and the balance of the county 5-year CIP is about $89 million. And that includes our major project in there is a new courthouse, and it also includes a new fire station in West Creek, amongst a number of other projects. So goal number 3, and sometimes this is goal number 3 as the way we've adopted it, but we start with goal number 3. We have to make sure that we're operating with sound financial principles. This year we were pleased to achieve a second AAA bond rating. This time was from Moody's. We had obtained one in 2015 from S&P. These are primary indicators of our ability and strong financial management, but also our ability to repay debt as we would need to consider it in the future. As we look at borrowing for projects for schools and county facilities, those bond ratings will serve us well in the long-term total cost to our residents for those kinds of facilities. We have, in partnership with all of our constitutional officers in schools, are working towards the implementation of our core financial management system. We're still pushing hard to have a July 1 implementation of part of that, and then we will follow behind with HR and then shortly thereafter follow behind with our treasurer and commissioner side of the house. And so we've made investments there north of $1 million, and we're working hard to make sure that those systems will serve the community for many years to come. You may not know that the county's current financial systems have been in operation over 20 years. And so we've committed to moving from that format to one that should serve us for hopefully another 20 years to come. And our policies. One of the areas that individuals last year, I don't think we take them for granted, but they're always our core principles of we start with strong fund balances. We start with the ability to have good policy. We didn't share this as much last year, and as I went around to share the budget, everyone said, oh, okay, your budget's okay, and I like a lot of what's in it, but what do you have to actually should the bottom fall out, should the market change? We have really sound policies that support both unassigned and assigned budget areas. You can see that we do have over $18 million in unassigned, an additional $14.1 million in assigned, and we've created within the past year a revenue stabilization, another fund of another $1.8 million. And we have a number of other funds that you're not seeing here that make up our total, but these are all based on policies the board have adopted, and we are consistent in these recommendations. One of the things you're seeing up here, even with our planned borrowing in the 5-year capital improvement plan, largely the elementary school, courthouse, fire station, you will see even with those policies, we maintain standards far below our adopted policies in those borrowing recommendations for you. It's also important to note that the 5-year capital improvement plan is based on ability to pay that we project with no planned tax increase. And so there are large projects, but we have planned and built debt service reserves and have debt coming off the books that will allow us to tackle those large projects without causing a spike and potentially impacting not only our policies, but also putting us in a position that would negatively impact our ability to pay. And we certainly aren't going to put ourselves in those positions. Goal number 4. This one includes a lot of our top priorities. I'm going to start with education. The general fund recommendation includes an increase of 3.3% funding for public education. It's up to $740,000 additional funds. The schools, when you include the other funds, we'll see an overall increase of about 4%, about $1.3 million in total. And the capital improvement plan for the schools, and I've talked about some of them, but Gooch Elementary is the large one, renovations, but the fiscal year 20, you can see some of the specific projects there listed that the schools plan to undertake. I think it's only fair to our colleagues and partners at the schools to recognize that my introduced capital improvement plan is not exactly what the schools have requested. Mine is more consistent with last year's adopted priorities. We do have a joint meeting on March 12th where we're going to discuss the school's full request. And you will see in the school's full request that Goodson Elementary came in projections higher than the prior year's capital improvement plan had projected. And the schools have seen a priority to move up the projects at Goochland High School and Goochland Middle School in their request to us. And we will have ample time to discuss that and those priorities. We have been meeting with the schools and sharing some perspectives on that, and I think it's a conversation that the boards will have collectively a little more in the weeks to come. Wanted to talk about public safety. We talked about the priority of education. Public safety is our second top priority. Public safety as a category will see about a 9.4% funding increase in this recommendation. Also, the capital improvement plan in the 25-year plan has about $102 million, primarily anchored by the courthouse, but there are a number, not only the West Creek Fire Station, which is within the 5-year plan, there are fire stations projected in other districts and areas throughout the 25-year plan, but this also includes the large replacements of tankers and ambulances and ladder trucks, those kinds of things that are critical to operations, and also the day-to-day kinds of things, the SCBA air breathing units that they use, large expenditures and investments that we plan to make in the particular area of fire. This year's budget for the sheriff, there was formally one additional position requested from the Sheriff's Department. This budget does recommend funding that additional position. We, again, are continuing the vehicle replacement program for the Sheriff's Department. It's amazing how many miles that are put on both Sheriff's and Fire and Rescue vehicles in service to our community. And we are looking to also support training initiatives and specific programs within the Sheriff's Department. I should point out here, if you recall, the Sheriff came in last year requesting a number of additional deputy positions. One of the things that we've been talking to both Fire and Rescue and the Sheriff's Department about is realigning their pay scales to be more consistent and competitive in the market. And this budget does continue something that we're looking to begin this spring into next year. And the Sheriff had shared with us that that was one of his top priorities, and therefore some of the positions that were requested prior have been removed in this year's request. He'll share with you later, but just wanted you to know that you may not see that in years to come. So, but this budget does support the recommendations to support those pay scales. Fire and Rescue, individually as a category, seeing about a 10% recommended increase. This budget invests in 7 additional firefighter EMS personnel to serve our residents. This will allow us to increase 24/7 staffing to at least 2 additional stations. You're going to hear from Interim Chief Eddie Ferguson here in a little bit to talk about some of those staffing, but 7 additional positions. I had a citizen email me earlier today and said, I want to make sure they're all ALS. We would love to hire all ALS personnel if we could, and we certainly strive to try to get certain levels of capabilities within our employees, but we're always trying to figure out how we can increase service levels within a balance. Last year we added 6 positions. We're adding another 7 this year to continue to meet the demand of our residents. Our volunteers have been our backbone of this community for many years. And you're going to see some great numbers on volunteerism increases in the last year, but our dependency and balance is still shifted to where we have to add some more career staff to make sure our residents are served. And we believe this budget continues a planned investment of additional firefighters to support those needs. The capital improvement plan includes tanker replacement, turnout gear replacement, and we do a set aside for funding for West Creek Fire Station. So we do have some cash. It's not all debt planned for the West Creek Fire Station out in year 4. And the 25-year CIP includes about $83 million plus for overall equipment and additional stations. You're going to hear from Tim Clough with Animal Protection here today. As you know, we have a new shelter that we've been building in partnership with Gooch and Pet Lovers. That shelter is projected to open this summer, and we are going from 2,000 square feet to roughly 14,000 square feet of operation. Right now, that 14,000 square feet is only supported by 2 full-time people. Mr. Clough had asked for 4 positions, 2 full-time and 2 part-time. This budget recommends 2 part-time. And you're going to see that we also include a partnership that furthers our relationship with Gooch and Pet Lovers to increase volunteerism out there and reduce the dependency for us to add full-time people. An Office of Children's Services finally under public safety here. These are the core mandated services that we are provide under state law and support. We are seeing some growth in the costs here. We've been pretty steady and actually dipped a little bit, but we are seeing some increase to plan and project for next year. And finally, as part of our strategic goals, as I said earlier, the majority of the general fund budget, similar to the schools budget, we're all operations intensive and personnel intensive. We are, in this budget, similar to the schools in the region, recommending a 3% merit increase for our employees and to maintain the current levels of employee health care costs, which means absorbing the increase that we're seeing. And Ms. Parrish is going to be talking to you about more in depth here on all the employees here later today. This is our 3rd year of the county benchmark, and as I mentioned to you, the public pay scale adjustments that have been discussed. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. As we go through the entire budget, not only will Ms. Parrish share with you a little more detail on the personnel that not only are being recommended, but were requested. As we get into different sectors of the budget review, you're going to have a full opportunity to talk about what was funded, what wasn't funded, and the priorities within particular departments. But you can see the majority of our investments are in public safety on the county side. 9 of 12 full-time positions are in our public safety categories. And one of the things I didn't spend too much time on here, but when we think about life safety, our building official is also included in a public safety category here. And so they do all the inspections and those kinds of things. And this balances some of that review. I should point out that one of the part-time pieces that we will have in here is a convenience center part-time attendant. Those of you that may have stopped by the convenience center yesterday might have realized the doors may not have been open. This budget increases service to our residents on less traditional holidays. We will still be closed for Easter and Christmas and the larger holidays, Thanksgiving, but this does allow us to add some additional hours at the convenience center for our residents to enhance their services. I'm going to shift gears on you a little bit right now and shift to the utilities. I said earlier that we treat the utilities as an enterprise fund. So the rates that we charge offset our operational expenditures, and the different areas that we collect support different components of it. Consistent with our overall rate study that we had last year, in order to sustain operations at current levels, we have a 5% water rate increase, 6% sewer. This is consistent with last year. This is about a bill increase every 2 months of about $5 for the typical customer. Our connection fees, we do benchmark our connection fees against the region. We had fallen behind in our connection fees that we charge. And these are for new customers. So existing customers, this doesn't necessarily impact. But if you're just connecting to water or sewer the first time, there is a rate increase recommended for that. I want to talk a little bit about the TCSD. We are recommending this rate to remain flat as well. There is no increase in the Tuckahoe Creek Service District recommended for FY 2020. Tuckahoe Creek Service District is something that's somewhat mystical to some that don't really understand it. So I'm going to try to break it down for you as quickly as I can. We have a particular defined geographic area of Goochland County that pays an additional tax rate of 32 cents. For that benefit, they will have access at either now or at some point in the future to potentially connect to water and sewer services that you otherwise wouldn't if you were outside of that district. To take care of that and the primary infrastructure that got us to that capacity, we made large investments as a county. Those large investments have a debt service on the back end that has to be paid. We don't anticipate the current debt to be paid off until early 2040s. And that program has an escalating level of debt service between now and fiscal year 2028. The model you're seeing in front of you is based on an average 5% annual growth. We have in the Tuckahoe Creek Service District surpassed a 5% annual growth. And so in years prior to what you're going into fiscal year 2020, you see the orange that peaks up above the gray line. Those funds are set in a reserve. And if we were ever in a position where the values dropped out in the Tuckahoe Creek Service District to pay back the overall debts, we have some reserve we could potentially lean on to help cover that. So someone asked me recently, do you anticipate an increase in the Tuckahoe Creek Service District? My answer to them is, I can't promise you never, but what I can tell you in the foreseeable future, we have planned appropriately for the tax to take care of the debt obligation in the Tuckahoe Creek Service District. This is extremely important to know that we're at a 32-cent rate that we think is stable and can be maintained. Not long ago, before refinancing, this rate was projected to go substantially higher. And right now, we believe that this fund is fully stable and plan to, for the foreseeable future, project it to be so as well. These are the combined rates. So while we enjoy the lowest general property tax rate at 53 cents, it's only fair to point out that those that are in the service district do pay an additional 32 cents. It does still place us very competitive in the region and still below Henrico County, our neighbor to the east. This is where you can see some of those investments. As you can imagine, I shared with you the growth chart earlier on commercial investment, and you can see really where the growth has occurred in the Tuckahoe Creek Service District. Just since 2012, we're close to doubling the total amount of value in the Tuckahoe Creek Service District. And we see that that is going to continue to grow in the years to come. So I've shared with you our priorities. I've shared with you some of the process and our projections, but I'm only fair if I share with you some of the downside. We've enjoyed a year of growth in our values, but that at 6%, I dare say I cannot sustain a recommendation of that nature by any means. And future budgets, as we project, will not be based on that kind of growth annually. And so we need to be consistent as we're projecting. As we project expenses, we're basing them on more realistic, more in the 3% range for future budget projections. Road improvements are going to continue to be a challenge. State funding is limited, and as we have growth in road needs, we're going to have to plan appropriately for road improvements. As I said earlier, the volunteer losses that we've had over a number of years have positioned us where we're making additional investments in public safety, and we've ramped up our career staffing to meet those needs, and we'll continue to need to stay consistent with the plans that we've developed. With this board's support, we've been able to make some major dents into salary and compensation gaps. We are, as this budget includes a recommendation for the year 3 of our benchmark, we've taken care of some of the public safety gaps that we hope to implement even before the end of this fiscal year. But we want to make sure that we don't fall behind. And you know, we're not always the leader in compensation by any means, but we want to make sure our employees are competitively paid and we can attract and retain quality talent to serve this community. Public education from the Commonwealth, we always worry about what implications that they can make on our local schools. We pay one of the highest composite indexes in the Commonwealth, or it's a consequence of having one of the highest composite indexes. We get less state funding. And as I said earlier, there's some pros and cons to that, but certainly value the investments the state makes in public education. And again, I shared the burdens that we need to understand, not only the residents of means, but the residents in need. So that is a high overview of what is included in that 2-inch binder that you have there. We are going to have a lot of opportunity for you to dive into each of the different sectors. Today is the 19th. Following me today, you'll get to hear from our sheriff. You'll get to hear from Fire and Rescue, Tim Clough with Animal Protection, and Kelly will wrap up presentations today on HR and workforce. Also today, we are going to ask you to authorize tax rates. And Ms. Horlacher will come up and talk you through the process of what we need to do. Many of our residents know this, but what we advertise today can only be reduced. It cannot be increased. And so if there was an interest in increasing the taxes, which I haven't quite heard, we would actually have to renotice and manage those dates to be able to move our process forward. But the board has authority to reduce. They do not have the ability to increase unless we re-advertise and such after today. On February 26th, we will spend a fair amount of time going over our revenue projections, much more deep dives on all the revenues that I shared with you today, our debt policies, and where we stand with all of our debt policies and what's being recommended to you. Mr. Longshore will be here to talk to you through the public utilities and the Tuckahoe Creek Service District implications. We will extend an invite to those in judicial administration to come and talk about their operational requests. You'll get to hear from us again a little bit on the general administration, and general administration includes my office, county attorney's office, the general kinds of functions. Mr. Kilduff will be here to go over community development and economic development requests. So that's on February 26th. Again, these are at 3 o'clock in this room. On March 5th, Dr. Raley will be with us and introduce the school's adopted operating budget and a high-level review of the capital improvement plan. But I anticipate that on March 12th, we will spend much more time diving into their requests, but at least making sure you have a primer to prep for the next meeting. Mr. Drumright will go over all the health categories that we have within our budget and share those with you. General services, Mr. Stamey will be here to go over all the general services, parks, and those particular budget categories on March 5th. On March 12th is the joint meeting with the schools. We also have 3 town halls that Mr. Alvarez announced when we kicked off today's meeting. There are many opportunities for further engagement. I also always encourage individuals, if you can't make these meetings, emails, give us a call. We have many other meetings that we're not necessarily there to talk about the budget, but I always get feedback. And so it's a constant process, and the board is always getting additional feedback in this process as well. On April 2nd at 7 p.m. begins our formal process of public hearings as it relates to the budget. There will be 3 different public hearings that evening, primarily related to different components of the budget. And we're targeting right now April 16 for budget adoption. We always target middle of April to make sure that we get everything tied up. And this the budget's formally effective July 1 upon adoption, but it also helps in the commissioners' activities and their processes to be able to take care of the billing for future years as well. So I did want to just wrap up with you today and really make sure that a couple things were clear. We wanted to make sure we were introducing a budget that was sensitive to those most in need in our community. We wanted to introduce a budget that was supportive of our top priorities as a community. We wanted to introduce a budget that supports and spurs new business growth and investment. We're not recommending an increase in the real estate property tax rate. We're lowering the personal property tax rate, and we're not increasing the Tuckahoe Creek Service District rate. And so, Mr. Chairman, with that, I stand ready to answer any of the high-level questions, but I have a very competent and capable group of individuals following me here today. Again, would like to thank our finance department, our partnership with the schools, and our constitutional officers for being able to get in a position to share this recommended budget to you here this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Budeski. Any questions or comments or clarifications from Mr. Budeski?
I'm going to get in all the details later. Yeah.
Okay, looks like none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job. So next, I believe we have the Sheriff Agnew.
Afternoon, Mr. Chairman, board members, Ms. McGee, Mr. Budeski. I know you've heard me say this before, but I want to say it again. I really need to impart to you how much I appreciate the way Mr. Budeski's handled the budget the last couple of years. It's all business, it's no games, and I really appreciate it. And it's a testament to you guys for encouraging him to do that and allowing him to do that, and I thank you for it. Mr. Budeski touched on most of the things that we needed in our budget, and as I've told each of you individually, our budget was a trade-off because we need people, but we are carrying such a load of empty positions year after year after year. It didn't make any sense to me to ask for more positions that we would carry for year after year after year without being able to fill them. So our emphasis this time was on revamping our pay scale and getting a public safety pay scale that we hoped would help us to recruit and retain more people. So that has been the bulk of our budget request this year. Let me go about by talking about some of the things that we did this year, some of the things that we've continued, that we do year after year after year, and some of the things that we have brought back. The young man you see in the middle there, his name is Trayvon Harris. He won the poster contest for Crime Stoppers, received a $500 check for doing so. Crime Stoppers is a meeting we attend every month. Hopefully to get tips to help us to solve crimes. We don't get quite as many as we like. But just so you know, Crime Stoppers has evolved now into more than just a phone answering service. They have something called the P3 app, particularly with young people in the city, particularly. They are now receiving text messages regarding particular crimes. So we hope that we will encourage people out here to avail themselves of that app. Everyone's got a cell phone. It's real easy to do. Most young people I see never look up from their cell phone anyway, so another text certainly won't hurt them. So anyhow, Crime Stoppers is a good program, and they do more than just take tips, and one of them is to provide scholarship money for students to get involved. We're continuing to work with the DEA and the Drug Take-Back program. We've been doing it since day one. This past year, we did it twice, once in April and once in October. Our pickup points are West Creek Emergency Center and Company 1 Fire and Rescue. And we picked those because one is centrally located and one is on the east end, where the bulk of our folks live. So we collected almost 500 pounds of unused medications in 2018, and that's a lot. That's a lot of pill bottles. I'll give you some example of what it looks like. That's the kind of stuff that we get when we do that. And we turned it over to the DEA, who then destroy it safely so it doesn't get in our water system and so it doesn't fall into the wrong hands, and so that we don't inadvertently become part of the opioid epidemic that's hurting our country right now. We'll continue to do that, and it may end up being more than twice a year, given the sheer volume of drugs that we're getting from this particular area. We have, again, started our Goose and Kids Fishing Day. We did it in May this year. We've done this in the past, but haven't done it for a good 10 or 12 years. It's been spearheaded by a couple of our deputies. And, of course, the idea is to get kids together, get them involved in a healthy outdoor program. We've partnered with the Boy Scouts. They've been very supportive of us as having this at Brady Saunders. And these are some of the pictures that we had this past year. We had a good turnout. It was a really hot day. I think it hurt some of the turnout. But the kids had a good time, and there's nothing like catching your first fish as a permanent memory. And our guys really enjoyed this. We have a lot of guys who hunt and fish. They really enjoy doing this. We hope to keep it going and perhaps even expand it even more. And this is really a testament to Corporal Harrison Hankins, who got this going again. We did it years and years ago, but he's gotten it going again, and he has the end with the Boy Scouts. So we'll continue to encourage him to develop that. We've adopted a new program. We actually started about 2 years ago. It's called Refuse to be a Victim. It is a program of the National Rifle Association. It is not about firearms. It is about teaching people to be more aware of their surroundings and not to become a victim of crime. And we go over so many different aspects. And we did 2 of them last year, had about 50 people go through it. And we want to continue to do that. 3 of us are instructors, including me. And it's at absolutely no cost to the county. The NRA provides everything to us since we're law enforcement. And we hope to have at least 2 more this coming year. There's some of the folks that took it, and you can see the lady in the front looks like she's getting ready to punch somebody in the face. So we're not really teaching them how to do that, but we're teaching them how to avoid being punched in the face. We had an open house in August of this year. We hope to make that an annual event as well, and it allowed us to bring people into our new EOC, let people see how we operate. Got them here. We opened up everything we had and had demonstrations. We had face painting. We had the American Legion come and do hot dogs and hamburgers for us, and we did the most favorite thing was the dog demonstration, having Chase, who's our canine, do the Red Man demonstration out in front of the courthouse. Unfortunately, the thunderstorms chased us away, and had to leave a little bit early, but again, we hope people had a good time and that they'll come back in following years when we continue this. Here's the courthouse. That was just as the thunder clouds were rolling in, but nobody wanted to leave because they wanted to see how the dog went after the man in the red man suit. As always, we're always trying to stay on top of events that seem to be happening all over this country, because obviously one of them is active shooter. There's not a whole lot that we want to disclose in this venue as to exactly how we're trying to plan for it, but it's not just the sheriff's office. It's us, it's the state police, it's the school system, it's fire and rescue, it's businesses, and we are trying to partner with all these folks to talk to them, make them be aware that they should have a plan in the events that it happens. Not that the plan will be perfect, because there is no perfect plan. And what's the first thing that happens when crisis happens? The plans go out the window and you have plan B. But at least we're getting people thinking about it, and we are training, and we're actively working on it all the time. This is a photograph of this year where we had an exercise, and we do this when school is not in session, by the way. We don't do it when school is in session. That's That's more of a school function than our function, but we come in full bore and we do the very best we can to simulate what we might run across should we have, heaven forbid, this happen in our community. And as always, as we have for the last 26 years, we help the Christmas Mother every Christmas by delivering Christmas Mother presents to people who can't get there and pick them up. And we get pretty good participation doing that. And these are the folks from the Sheriff's Office who helped this year. And that big van you see behind us, that's not a UPS van. That actually belongs to us. And it's used to transport the tactical team. And it's very spacious and allows us to carry a lot of presents in there. Okay, we had some awards this year. We don't have any in-house awards, but we have plenty of agencies outside of the Sheriff's Office who give us and recognize our folks. Let me point this out. This is Deputy Terry Russell. He received the 2018 Sons of the American Revolution Deputy Sheriff of the Year Award. That's his wife with him. And believe it or not, that was his second award of the year because he also got the Mothers Against Drunk Driving Award for having the most DUIs in the county last year. He's a very active deputy. As a result of his drunk driving escapades, he gets an awful lot of other drugs. He's recovered a lot of stolen property. He's found wanted people, and Lord knows how many people he's prevented from getting hurt by getting these folks off the road. So we're very grateful that MAD and Sons of American Revolution recognize these folks. Some of the local folks, the DeWitt Clinton Lodge number 141, recognized a dispatcher, that is Heather Stewart. Heather's been with us, I think, going on 12 years now. Just so happens her husband's a state trooper, so she's got a real law enforcement family. She does a wonderful job for us. She was the dispatcher of the year last year, and Harrison Hankins was the deputy of the year last year. So we're grateful to all these folks for recognizing us. Okay. Last year was a very strange year. Although the incident with Bethany Stevens in the lower end of the county happened in December of 2017, it really continued on into most of last year, and we had a lot of national and international news attention for a number of events that happened here in Goochland. And I think that's just the wave of the future. And for any of you keeping up with current events, we had something happen here today that apparently has gotten the news media very interested. And you can watch tonight at 6 o'clock. But it had to do with vandalism at Tuckahoe Plantation, which we think is an outgrowth of what was happening downtown Richmond with all the demonstrations down there. But the news attention has made it kind of difficult. And just because something happens once and you see it and it's on the news and you move on to something else the next day, we don't. We have to continue to work on it. We continue to live with it, and that's what we did with some of these events. It takes me back to September of 2010 when a gentleman was shot up in Sandy Hook. We have not solved that murder. We are still working on it. We still go to the grand jury to present evidence. We are much closer today than we were, but we're not there yet. Certainly hope and pray that we get there, but we are not there yet. So we're still working on that and spending an awful lot of time interviewing folks and trying to get to the bottom of what happened. Again, there's Bethany Stevens. Her death occurred in December of 2017, but there was intense media scrutiny the entire year about this. And in March, February, we released the autopsy results from the medical examiner that confirmed that she had been mauled by animals. So that continued until we got lab results back in the middle of March when we were able to definitively say that yes, these animals were responsible for her death. And even today, there are people who tend to think that that's not what happened. But it was a very trying and troubling time. And as I had said before, and I'll say again, I hope to God I'd ever see anything like that again. We all know about Mr. Troy Skinner. He was in the news today, by the way. He pled not guilty for the attack that he had here in Goochland in June of last year. This really attracted some international scrutiny. It still does. I'm still getting calls from the New Zealand press. And there's really nothing I can tell them. It's not our case anymore. It's the FBI case. As you know, we null-prossed our charges. The FBI picked them up. Should we choose at some point in the future to bring the state charges back, that's an option. It is most likely not going to happen if he gets the justice we think he deserves from the FBI. And if I haven't said it before, I'll say it again. The lady who dealt with Mr. Skinner, in my mind, is a hero, or heroine. She did exactly the right thing to protect her family. And I'm very proud to live in Goochland where someone can deal with that and take care of their own problems. We're pretty much done with this for now, I hope, and I hope he gets what he deserves from the federal court system. Again, news media was all over, New York Post, every New Zealand paper, almost every paper in the world. It happened again in August when we had a young child left in a car at Capital One. This is from the New York Times. That was another tragic situation that we had to deal with. It took a lot of time. His father was ultimately convicted of contributing to delinquency of a minor, but I think that was kind of a no-win situation. I don't understand how it happens. I just know that it does. People forget children in cars, and they don't mean to do it, and it was a very tragic situation. But it was hard on us, and again, it had national and international implications for us here. Again, this is Seattle Times. Now, what do we do in the future going forward about that particular problem? I didn't have any ideas, but there's a young lady in Midlothian. Her name is Hannah Rudy. She's 14 years old. She has an idea, and we're going to partner with her, and our hope is that she will, through her foundation, raise the money necessary for these hanging tags that we will distribute to people throughout the county, and hopefully with Fire and Rescue's help, for folks with car seats and babies, to every time they get in the car, to hang that car tag with the baby in. When they take the baby out, change it out for a baby out. Now, will this help the really absent-minded person who's not paying attention? Probably not. But might it get people used to looking inside vehicles as they pass one, if they see one of these? I wonder if there's a kid in there or not, and maybe look into the vehicle to see if that's the case and maybe save somebody? That's very possible. And Mr. Badesky, I need to check with you. I talked to her dad today, and she would like to come address the board on the 5th, if we can make that happen.
She's welcome to come. Citizens' time is open. We can have her come in then.
Okay.
That work?
Yes, sir. That'll work. But she wants to talk about her program. She's very, very proud of it, and I think it's pretty cool for a 14-year-old girl to come up with something like this. Okay, back to business. We did an enormous number, at least for us, of search warrants, drug search warrants last year in the county. We did 21 of them. We have noticed a tremendous increase in the production of marijuana, the growing of marijuana, indoor grows and outdoor grows. And just whatever you think about marijuana, whether you think it's not harmful to you or is harmful to you, there's one thing that we have found to be very, very clear, and that is the distribution of marijuana is very, very violent, and it's fraught with danger. In fact, the murder we're working on that I referenced in 2017, that was over marijuana. It's very dangerous, and we're seeing an awful lot of it, regardless of how you feel about whether or not it should be decriminalized, legalized, or whatever. This is a picture of one of the grow houses we found out not too far from your house, Ms. Lascalette.
Nice.
That's just a small portion of it. It was a shed that was probably, I don't know, 12 by 20. So pretty good sized shed. It was very sophisticated for something that from the outside looking in just looked like a tool shed. And there was quite a bit in there. They have not yet come to court, but they've been charged with distribution of marijuana. This one here, this was in the courthouse area, and it's very hard to tell. You can see how marijuana blends in with other plants, but if you look in the foreground there, those are 12-foot high marijuana plants. They too have been charged and have not yet been to court, but we're seeing an awful lot of that. Well, how are we finding this? Well, we're having informants come and telling us, and that is how we're getting this information, and that's why we're doing so many drug search warrants. Now, the problem with drug search warrants is they take a lot of people, some more than others, but we have to do an assessment every time we do a search warrant to find out what is the threat assessment to our people, what's the threat assessment to people extraneous to, and are there people in the house that might be a threat to that have nothing to do with this? So it's manpower intensive, and it takes a lot of planning. Okay, I told you about the ongoing issues. The number one is that we can't seem to be able to fill our positions the way we'd like to, so we talked with Mr. Badesky and came up with a plan that I think is very fair, that will help us address where I think we need to go in the future in terms of recruiting people and hopefully keeping there, and that's the salary scale that we've come up with. Just so you know, it's not just a local issue. It is a Virginia issue. It's an East Coast issue. It's a national issue. This particular news story was Channel 6 earlier this month, and their statistics showed that just the pool of applicants in Central Virginia decreased by 67%. That's not counting the decrease in quality of those 67%, of those that didn't decline. It's absolutely scary that we can't attract people into this job, and it's a wonderful job, but unfortunately it's not always characterized that by our friends in the media and by some political components, and it's taken a toll, and we're having a hard time getting folks. So what do? We're competing with Henrico, we're competing with Hanover, we're competing with Henrico, we're competing to some extent with the city and the state police for that ever-shrinking pool. So what do we need? We need something that will get them to open the door and take a good look at us, because we can't offer the specialties that these folks offer. We can't offer the career development that some of them can offer, but maybe we can offer the salary. And by the way, this is a pretty darn good place to live and work. So if we can get them in the door, we feel like we can sell what we have. And so thank you to Mr. Badesky for working on that for us. Again, this is from Police One. It's again, this just to underscore that this is a national problem. It's not just a local or a regional problem. Okay, let's take a look at some of our statistics from last year. Calls continue to increase from year to year to year. Now, what I've done in these following slides, I've taken 6 years of data for various items, and I've computed an average, so you can see, what the average is over that 6-year period, because years fluctuate. You can have a down year, you can have a really high year, but you want to look at the average to see where you're really going, and that's what the average and the trend lines do. Our calls decreased slightly, but still a little bit less than average. I'm not exactly sure why, except we didn't have those many weather events, and quite frankly, those are what drive up a lot of our calls. You have a single bad weather event on the interstate or in this, and it can quadruple your call volume for the day. But the calls went down for us just a little bit. 911 calls continue to come in. We're trying to get on top of the text to 911 mandate that's, I think, 2021. It's a little scary, but the feds are mandating that every PSAP have the ability to take texts from people for 911. The reason that scares me is that you rarely have enough information when you get that initial call, so you did in turn going to have to make several contacts, and texting streams can sometimes take a while. It's a whole lot easier if you can talk to someone, but I'm not in that generation that texts, so I don't quite get it, but I understand that we need to get on top of this. So we're working on that, and hopefully we'll get it done by the end of this year so that we'll be able to take these texts. But you can see that the calls coming by via 911 are going up at a pretty fast rate. Here's the one where there's really been a trend upward, and I know Eddie's probably got numbers that are similar for you, but these are the actual calls that come, calls for services, we call them, that go out to fire and rescue. They may break them down a little differently, but quite clearly they're workload volume has increased a lot and will continue to go, particularly if we keep having the crashes we've been having on our highways. Civil, everybody forgets about the civil end of the sheriff. Just to review, we have to serve the civil papers. We're the mail service for the courts. We have to staff the courts to make sure that they're secure, including when people are screened. And we have to move the people in the jails, in the prisons, back and forth from the jails to the court and then back home again. So it's manpower intensive and it's time intensive. That is all the civil and court end of what we do. Civil papers are up a little bit. Quite frankly, the civil papers have gone down, and since I first became sheriff, there used to be many, many more civil papers than there are now, but the complexity of the papers have changed, and there's much more complex than they used to be. And it's more than just leaving a copy with somebody who comes to the door or posting on the door. Some of the writs that we have to do, some of the evictions that we have to do can be very time-consuming. And it can also be dangerous. These are the writs of possession. These are the evictions and the people who claim that they've had property that they need to be reclaimed. And believe it or not, there are stores in this state who will sell people beds and mattresses on credit. And then, because they don't get paid, they ask us to go out and get used mattresses out of houses. So we do a lot of that, believe it or not, and I don't understand it because you cannot resell a used mattress, but they figured, hey, it belongs to me, you're not paying for it, we want you to go get it, and that's not one of the things we particularly like to do. Here's the one that's a problem, because it's in the news all the time. You hear about the General Assembly about how they're fixing the ECO, TDO problem, that they're working on mental health. They haven't done anything. It's all talk. It's a problem. It's not getting better. You can see how long it can take to do these things. We keep getting more and more and more of them. Facilities have been closed. They're not adding to facilities. They're not taking care of the mental health problem in this country, certainly not in this state, despite what they're telling people on their soapbox in the General Assembly. Excuse me, I'm on mine. It needs to be fixed. It's a real problem. And this is not something that your law enforcement agency should have to be dealing with. This is not what we do, but we spend upwards of 10, 11 hours in emergency rooms with these people when they're in a mental health crisis because there are not resources to deal with it adequately. It's a real problem, and it's not helping the client. It's certainly not helping us because it's taking us off the road, and it is not fixing the problem. So I hope that someday somebody in this General Assembly will fix it and do what it needs to have a place where these people can be helped, because they're not being helped now. Concealed handgun permits, well, they exploded. And let's see, in about 2008 is when concealed weapons permits started going up, and they haven't slowed down. If you do the numbers, and a concealed handgun permit's good for 5 years. So if you take 5 years worth of data there and you multiply it out, you'll find that about 11 to 12% of the citizens in Goosen County have a concealed handgun permit, which is pretty high, but it's pretty good. And it comes in handy, as we saw back in June when that fella from New Zealand ran into the wrong person. FOIA requests. We went from almost having none a few years ago to having an increasing number. Now, FOIA requests, some of them are not difficult, some of them are real difficult. They'll ask for files on certain cases, they'll ask for photographs, they want body camera footage, they want audio from dispatch, and sometimes they want stuff, notes from deputies and things like this. Now some of this, we have the discretion as to whether or not to release it. Some of it is not discretionary and we have to release it. So sometimes we have to go hunt all this down, get it together, and then try to send it to them in that window of 5 days, which the law requires us to meet, to get it to them. So that is an administrative issue that's causing us some issues. All right, court days, they're going back up again. We have a new JDR judge, and she's meeting 2 days a week instead of 1. And we're starting to see more court on the circuit court and the 16th Judicial Circuit just got 2 new judges appointed. So there will probably be more days here too. We haven't been able to get the court dates we need. And so we'll have I don't know who will be sitting here on a more regular basis, but I suspect that we'll have more court days in the upcoming years. Why is that important? It's because guys have to move inmates, so we have to have it staffed, and it definitely impacts us. Those are the magnetometer screenings. That's how many people we screen coming into district court. We don't have the numbers outside circuit court because we just instituted a mechanism to count them in our tent. And by the way, thank you for recognizing that we need to do something about the security screening building next to the courthouse. That will really help because it's pretty miserable out there in the tent under some of these conditions, even though we have some heat and all out there. But these numbers will go up a lot as we are able to count those numbers in front of circuit court. But that's how many people go through the magnetometers, and we're still finding pen knives and knitting needles and things that shouldn't be going into the courtroom. Again, we have to keep people back and forth. Prisoner transport mileage went up a little bit. You can see what the average is for a year, and that's how many miles we take going back and forth between Henrico, Chesterfield, Hanover, Roanoke, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, all over the state. All right, you guys remember the beats. Each of you has one of these beats in your district, and some of you pieces of another one. There's no surprise where the busiest beat is, and that's the Centerville area, northeast beat. And there are a lot of reasons for that. It's a lot of traffic, a lot of congestion. That's where the growth is. Ashland Road by itself could probably lead the district because it's very, very busy. These are where we spend our time. We spend the bulk of our time in the northeast, and the southeast is catching up, and that's the Mannequin area down there near 288. This is what some of the information that many of you want to know. Where are the worst intersections? And we had 19 intersections that had 10 more crashes for the last 6 years. Where's the worst one? Well, it's Broad and 288. And right behind it is several hundred yards down the road is Wilkes Ridge and Broad. Now that's gotten better. Those crashes really started before they diminished somewhat in the last couple of years. But you can see where the problem spots are, and I don't think it's a surprise to any of you where they are. In the Mannequin section, again, it's West Creek and Patterson, Blair, Patterson River. Shouldn't be any surprise to anybody. That's where the traffic is. That's where the congestion is. In Goose and Sandy Hook area, Fairgrounds Maiden, Fairgrounds Sandy Hook, and Whitehall and Sandy Hook. I think when VDOT finally gets around to putting the traffic circle in Fairgrounds Sandy Hook, that will help a lot, I hope. And in the far west, Shannon Hill and Broad. Traffic accidents, again, continue to go up. They slipped a little bit this year, but really not much. Not when you consider the average is 310 annually. I include this slide because people assume that every time we make a traffic stop, we write a ticket. We do not. This is the number of traffic stops against the number of summonses that are issued. And I do that because sometimes, if it's not an egregious traffic infraction, you're just as well off to give someone a warning and get them to go. After all, we're not here to raise revenue. We're here to try to reduce the problem. Now, we have exceptions. We have places where there's zero tolerance, and there's a threshold, and if you cross that threshold, you will get a ticket. But that's in real problem areas. But generally speaking, we try to keep the traffic summons issuance to serious violations and not minor ones. And then again, our DUI arrests tailed off a little bit this year. I'm trying to figure out why, because I don't think they've gone down, and I just think it's because we've had so many other things going on that we haven't had the extra people out to work selective to write as many. But I suspect that number is just a temporary dip, and we'll be back again, up again next year. And again, overall arrest dipped a little bit, but trending upward. So we're working hard. We're doing a lot of things. There's a lot to this job that people don't understand, and I appreciate your support. I appreciate what you're trying to do to help us to retain and recruit good people, because we've got to have good people in this business. You can't have just anybody having the authority we have, carrying the weapons we have, driving the high-speed cars that we drive, without being good, solid people. And we need to compete with our neighbors and get the very best we can. I think you guys recognize it. I appreciate it. And thank you very much. Do you have any questions?
Questions for the sheriff?
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind. Thank you, Sheriff. The numbers that you gave us, the statistics on the crime by beat, those were also 2018 numbers as well?
Those were 6-year numbers. I have the 2018 numbers, and I'd be glad to provide them for you.
Okay,
if you like.
yeah, I appreciate that. I was wondering if maybe you could give us that presentation, because it's
Certainly.
really chock full of information.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Other questions?
Mr. Chairman, can I just, one of the things, the sheriff's the first, if you will, departmental, even though he's not a county department, he's a constitutional officer. Wanted to just call your attention, the other presentations you're going to see from the departments are also going to bring your attention to the actual pages in the budget book that you've been provided. And as shared, you can see some more of the detail of particular lines throughout the budget. That all the departments try to do their best to detail their expenditure sides. And the Sheriff's Department has done a good job with that as well.
No more questions? Thank you, Sheriff.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation and for all you do.
Yes, sir.
If nobody minds, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and we'll be back here at 4:45. You mentioned 2012.
I will.
We just need to do it. It's probably because we're going back 6 years or whatever. But
It's another trick question.
You know what, I haven't been timing you for the last couple of months. I just want you to know that.
I think they noticed too. They may come up
I've
with
been
employee
like,
review.
I've been letting you slide a little bit.
One day when you need it, then
Yeah.
I don't know if he left or not, but he probably wanted to just see me.
Okay, Eddie, so this is your advance.
They just want to.
So this would be just point this arrow, it moves you through.
we're upgrading the tile in our bathroom, so, I mean, am I making it good, am I making it?
I don't think it's doing that. I just want to make sure it's working now.
By the way, good response to the Scott Park. I'm gonna send him a note too.
I'm just guessing, but you've got to.
Okay, so you're gonna arrow back. This is your arrow to go forward. This is your little beamer that starts there. If you wanna point to something, okay, good. Alright, so all you do is, this is your forward, this is your back. You'll be
That would help him a lot. If that were in the church, people might not feel that bad.
Church can use it. Most of the stuff I do is and we do it's occasional. There's one brewing now with somebody the Western Department has that's calling it. If we ever do form any kind of community, it's not an issue.
I think he's kind of heading the board for the church.
But those are few parts looking in there, you know, it's up and
He
down.
also talked to Matt Brewer about.
You'll get a few, and then all of a sudden,
They have like, they have
nothing.
Comcast.
So I had
But
one
it's
where
only
there was
one
a dispute
company
between
that
neighbors
goes to
on
the county.
Pocket.
And it was just too much money. Comcast wanted too much money. And I think Matt Brewer wanted too
Which
much money.
doesn't have anything.
But his company basically does
In the phone
if they
book,
come
you
out
go,
and resell it
you
for
listen,
Comcast.
you
So
know,
you probably pay a premium.
it costs you a couple hours. It's
I thought about it, just get a ditch witch and bury your own cable. But anyway. Yeah, he hasn't reached out to me, but. Yeah.
a way to undo that digitally, and we can undo that thing they want to figure out. Yeah, but that didn't look like mud. That looked like they'd taken a pin, not a pin, but a mechanism, a wipe thing. Yeah, an editing function. Yeah, that's good to know. Yeah.
I've had it up here. Make sure I get that one back. It's one of my favorites. That's what I have in my house. Very special. I've just ordered them red because they're awesome. Yeah, they are. They're a little extra, but it's worth it. I get like I get $3 for $6. Oh, well, we get them cheaper here. Okay. Because they're like $1.20 each. Okay. So I buy boxes of them because we use them in our JV.
Nobody is saying don't develop.
Oh.
They're saying not this way, not that. I mean, and why would they think, as long as there are cows grazing on Wall Street, that should, they're not out of land to develop. That land needs to be developed first.
I'm not in a you need to business.
Well, you know, George Andrews owns them yet. He must be trying to sell them. I'd like to do that. George, do it with your own land first.
But my point is, what Robert's always said, Compton was not too creative. Seriously, a lot of input. They got some issues that I don't know if somebody from Main Street knows. Was at the comp plan hearing. So, if you put in your, but yes, normally soft-spoken. John is like, we're not idiots. Somebody needs to know how to read. We know how to this Friday. And usually it's differently. And now he had come in on Monday. He's going to vote for you. And they allow, I would say in some respects, he's his homework. And he's not, and he'll get to
But maybe we should put into this, but
I'm not sure I got to see how that's going. I know mine will buy.
because I emailed the sheriff
Zoning, but apparently you can do golf course with two birds.
Yeah, okay. But now it's in the
You remember when they first started building the house around the golf course, somebody got the right of let's put the green fields in the golf course. So it's going to have a problem. And the golf course was saying, you can't come to the upper golf course, we don't care if you're here. So they changed the law saying that a green field in the house has to be on the same property as the house. So you have jurisdiction.
Yeah, I guess that would kind of put golf course out of business if there's a real water hazard.
Or, you know, if somebody says, oh, we have to go reach the green field in the middle of the fairway, you know, middle of golf season, so we have to,
So we got a long start.
there you go.
I'll go get some. So you might want to
All raised by Farmville Everyone okay?
It's dinner, huh?
Fortunately.
All right. Have a good night.
Hi, Dr. Riley.
How are you all? Okay.
Chief's gonna motor right through. Chief's gonna motor right through.
Okay, we're going to reconvene, and next on our agenda is Chief Ferguson to present the budget for fire and rescue.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, it's an honor and a privilege to stand before you today and represent the men and women of Goochland County Department of Fire Rescue and Emergency Services and the good work they do. Couldn't do that good work without your continued support and funding, and so we're excited to be able to submit to you today our FY20 budget presentation. The primary functions of the Fire Rescue Department respond to all hazards that threaten the safety, health, and economic well-being of the residents and business of Goochland County. This includes fires, EMS, as well as evolving technological threats. We educate our residents to avoid preventable incidents, minimize the need for emergency services, fire prevention, as well as health care type prevention. Prepare the county and its workforce for response to recovery from threats and hazards that present a threat to Goochland County and its well-being. Some of our fire rescue agency goals: respond to calls for assistance in a timely and professional manner, create order out of chaos, and treat all members of the community and organization with dignity and respect. Perform our functions in a physically sound manner, respecting the physical investment that the community has made in our department. Have a highly skilled and diverse workforce that combines both volunteers and career members as equal partners. One of our performance measures that you hear us talk about are EMS response time standards. And if you recall, we adopted these several years ago, and we look at these as a measure of our performance from the Virginia Office of Emergency Medical Services. We try to comply with these 90% of the time. And if you notice, the East End is 15 minutes from the time of the call to the time we arrive at the emergency, and we were able to meet that in 2018, 85% of the time. In the West End, it's 20 minutes. That's from about the Jackson Shop Road area west, and we were able to meet that about 88% of the time. Some of our recent accomplishments: we started out the year, we were staffing companies 2, 3, 5, and 6, 4 stations. By the end of the year, with the addition of 3 new employees, we were able to expand some staffing into Company 4 and Company 1 as often as possible. Familiar that we have the hydraulic rescue tool project, where we're trying to standardize all of our hydraulic rescue tool equipment across the county. Previously, we had several different brands of hydraulic rescue tools, and this was a project that was needed to make more consistent use of the equipment while on the emergency scene in uniformity across the county. We were able to do our second wave of that, and we put the Hurst hydraulic rescue equipment into companies 4 and 6 just recently. As the sheriff indicated earlier, with evolving threats, active assailants, active shooter type situations, we partnered with the schools as well as the sheriff's office, and last summer we offered a tactical emergency casualty care class known as TECC here in the county. We've added 3 medics to the sheriff's office rescue team. You know that's a dangerous business. Gosh, just a few weeks ago there was a state trooper killed in Cumberland County delivering that type of service. So we have 3 medics, 3 paramedics that are assigned to the sheriff's office rescue team. In addition to that, we facilitated CPR training and bleeding control training to the school system, as well as assisted the sheriff's office with implementing nasal naloxone. All our deputies are able to carry that now for the opioid epidemic. I'm happy to report that fire dollar loss was down by 62% from the previous year, and I'm also even happy to report that we didn't have any fire fatalities or no serious injuries to any of our firefighters or emergency responders by the same time. Some of our recent accomplishments, VCU, our Level 1 Trauma Center there at MCV, recognized for the second time in 3 years, we received the VCU Shining Light Award for trauma care that was delivered to one of the patients that we transported there to VCU. We had 3 members presented with the Valor Award for water rescue response out on Riddles Bridge Road. We're working with the Goochland Sheriff's Office on the emergency medical dispatch program, and we took possession of our new ambulance just a few weeks ago. A couple other accomplishments during 2018, we underwent our inspection from the Virginia Office of EMS. We were inspected every 2 years from it. And also, the Board of Pharmacy also came out and conducted an inspection. We purchased more water rescue equipment to enhance our water rescue capability. We have a portable fire suppression system now for one of our boats, Boat 4 primarily. And we have a rapid deployment raft that we put at Company 1. Many times we go out on the river and we need an inflatable raft because the water levels are low and our boats can't navigate the low water. On October the 6th, we had our second barn fire safety program where we engaged the agriculture and the equestrian community, and we actually had a Saturday morning program there at Deep Run where we talked about barn safety, and we partnered with animal protection and other county departments with that. Our budget here before you does represent some increases. It's about 18.2% increase in net county funds, but that's primarily made up of salaries for personnel. We have 7 positions being proposed in FY20 that we'll be able to expand our staff into several of the fire stations, which I'll cover momentarily. In addition to that, our operating costs are up. We have a fleet of about 60 vehicles. Some of the vehicles are starting to show their age. Our tankers were all bought new in 2002. Most of our engines were bought new in 2007. And so we do have high maintenance costs associated with labor and parts for some of that equipment. In addition to our personnel figures, the 41 positions today, counting the 3 positions that we are working to fill, and with the 7 additional positions requested in FY20, it'll bring our numbers to 48. So what will we do with those 7 other positions? Well, we want to shore up coverage for sure. I had mentioned earlier that we had been staffing 4 of the 6 fire stations, and this last year we started expanding our staff out to Company 4 in Fife. However, sometimes with people that are on leave or last-minute changes, we're not always able to staff Company 4. But with these 7 more positions that we're hoping to get in FY20, we plan on shoring up the staff in that Company 4 and expanding the staff into Company 1 in Mannequin. And what we're really looking at doing is actually adding 2 people to Company 1 24/7. And then start to go back around to the other stations and add that 3rd firefighter to some of the other crews. It is our goal, and I know you all know this, to have 3 people per shift in every fire station. And this will allow us to complete staffing the fire stations, but also go back around and start to add that 3rd firefighter. In addition, with more crews, it'll reduce response times. It'll allow for the present officers to focus on providing more supervision and support. And we'll be able to better manage the employees that take leave, whether it be annual leave that they earn or whether it be sick leave, or we could send people to training, for example. In addition, we feel like that by adding more career staff to some of the fire stations, we've seen an increase in volunteer participation. And so you may say, well, how does that happen? Well, anytime you get activity around the fire station, it draws in interest and it draws in people. And many times we're able to provide a driver for a fire engine that maybe we couldn't before. We may have several people there ready to go to a call, but there may not have been a driver. But adding the career staff in ensures that we have a driver for that apparatus so that we can respond out the door. So some of the explanations of changes, in addition to the personnel, are operating costs. Vehicle maintenance and repairs, for example. That's up almost $150,000. Uniforms and protective gear. Obviously, we have more personnel, so we have more need for uniforms, but the protective gear is also evolving. In addition to our structural turnout gear, we need ballistic vest protection. so that we can operate in those high threat areas with our law enforcement partners. EMS supplies continues to increase by adding Narcan and Naloxone because of the opioid, and the cost of EpiPens, as just a couple examples, drives those costs up. In addition, we're looking at replacing our copier and scanner in the office. We do a lot of copying in the office to support the various training programs that we offer. Many times the fire programs, they don't come with those manuals. We actually print those materials for our students. Replacement of office furniture. A lot of our office furniture is showing its age, and we need to look at replacing select pieces of that. Increased fire prevention materials, public education materials. Last year alone, we contacted over 2,000 people across the county. Some 800 of those were in the school systems alone during Fire Prevention Week, and we need to have those materials that we can give out to those folks that we're interacting with. One thing I want to mention is that support agreements are now in our budget with ODEMSA as well as MedFlight. And so ODEMSA is Old Dominion EMS Alliance. And ODEMSA is one of the 11 regional councils across the state that's charged with coordination of EMS and also training. And so we make a $2,600 contribution to ODEMSA. MedFlight 1 is the Virginia State Police helicopter based at the Chesterfield Airport that we called primarily for the serious calls, traffic accidents, but we also call them for river rescues. Many times they're helping us on the river when we have water rescue incidents, and we're making a very small contribution to MedFlight as what was requested. So that's now in our budget. Our emergency planning grants show up in our budget, and those emergency planning grants are particularly, one is aid to localities. It's administered by the Virginia Department of Fire Programs. It totals right around $75,000 coming into the department that we can use to support the fire operations of the department. 4 for Life is administered by the Virginia Office of EMS. It equates to about $26,000, and we can use that to support EMS operations throughout the county. And the other grant that's administered by VDEM is a local emergency planning grant, is actually where the match comes in. The locality match is about $16,000, almost $17,000. The local emergency planning grant is more of that emergency management style grant that allows us to prepare for the emergency coordination and management aspect of our operation. I'm happy to report that we are seeing some more participation with our volunteers, which is really good to see. You can see that we had increases in volunteer duty hours, both fire and rescue, between 2018 and 2019. We're able to make more combination crews. I'll tell you that even in addition to the increase in volunteer hours that we're seeing, we still need all the career staffing that we were asking for. And I think, as I spoke earlier, a lot of the career staffing does recruit a lot of the volunteer participation. There are always ways to go to calls, but also the volunteer participation is a wide spectrum of folks. We have the highly qualified volunteer personnel, and then we have the entry-level people coming in the door that we're in the process of assisting to gain experience and get those minimal qualifications. So we're really glad to see that. And of course, with the increasing call volume, almost 10%, our call volume has increased almost 10%. We need both our career and our volunteer members to answer the calls and keep the calls under control. Future outlook and challenges for our department. All of the future diverse development that's on the books and that's actually happening in the county. They mentioned already the age and size of our fleet, almost 60 vehicles. Some of the ages of the fire engines, some of the tankers we are not able to get parts for anymore. Resident expectations, back to our response times, our performance measures. Training demands are always increasing. Paramedic classes, for example, are over 3,000 hours and can cost as much as $6,500 to send someone for paramedic training. Consistent staffing is certainly something that we always strive to do. And health and safety initiatives. And this health and safety initiatives are everything from the entry-level medical assessments to ongoing annual physicals. But we have as you guys know, we have a high-risk occupation in a lot of ways. And it's not just with the types of risks we're exposed to on the calls, but also cancer. Cancer is one of those things that we're concerned about in our profession. was reading earlier today, firefighters are 9% more likely to contract cancer than the average general U.S. population, and 14% more likely to die from cancer. And that's because we believe it's because of the synthetics that are used in the homes that make the fires burn hotter. The smoke is more toxic, and we have to be mindful of that. Traffic incident safety. There have been 13 incidents between 2018 and 2019 where public safety vehicles and tow trucks have been struck on the highways by distracted motorists. You guys also, I know, are very much aware of the firefighter, Lieutenant Clark, that was killed in Hanover County in October on 295. And so traffic incident management is one of those things that we have to pay a lot of attention to and look for ways in the future to make it safer to operate on the roadways. Other future deliverables, we're hoping to be able to partner with the Volunteer Association and maybe the assistance of a AFG grant to add diesel fuel extraction systems into 5 of our volunteer-owned fire stations. We know that diesel exhaust is a carcinogen. We know it's been related to cancer. And so anything that we can do to get that exhaust out of the stations and off of the walls, off of the gear, the things that are stored in the station is going to be in our best interest. We want to improve incentives for our volunteers, look at more creative ways to deliver those incentives. Of course, we always have to have succession planning so that we are bringing along the leaders that will be coming behind us. With your support and the assistance of a RSAF grant, we're hoping to order another new ambulance, pretty much identical to the one we showed you in March. And we have the self-contained breathing apparatus replacement project. Our breathing apparatus is 10 years old. The new NFPA guidelines pretty much say that you have to have about 1/3 of your air supply left once your low pressure alarm bell goes off to get out of the environment that you're in. And so we're looking at hopefully making those upgrades. And then of course in the CIP we have a new tanker. I mentioned earlier our tankers were all bought new in 2002, and so we're looking at a new tanker that will hopefully help with the fire suppression aspect of the organization and some staff vehicles. Our minimum staffing plan is pretty much as you last saw it. Again, in FY20, we are hoping to add those 7 positions, and that will be able to allow us to staff all 6 fire stations with at least 2 people a day on every shift, and then to go back around and start to add that 3rd firefighter to the stations. And we did denote there at the bottom there are 3 current vacancies that we're ready to hire for in the present budget. In fact, we're working with Ms. Parrish to make conditional job offers. We've interviewed, and we're hopeful that we can fill those 3 positions sometime really soon. And of course, the staffing is forecasted out in the other years. One thing I thought was interesting that I thought I would share with you, back to NFPA, National Fire Protection Association. They have an NFPA 1710 guideline that talks about minimal amount of help that's needed on a fire scene to handle fire. And I want to emphasize that this is very much a minimal amount of help. But all of your support and all of the personnel that we're adding and the increase in volunteer participation is all helping us work towards being able to operate safely and efficiently and effectively on the fire ground. And so we'll focus on is the single family dwelling. NFPA 1710 talks about it takes 14 members, or maybe 15 if you're using an aerial device, and the reason that is because somebody is pretty much always manning that aerial device at all times to operate efficiently and safely on a structure fire. The one thing that it doesn't take into account that we have to deal with is rural water supply. Sometimes our rural water supply operation, and these folks here behind me can tell you, turns into as big of an operation as what's going on the fire ground where we're actually consumed in fire attack. And so by adding the additional staff and seeing the volunteer members participate helps us to operate efficiently and effectively on the fire ground. But it goes on to talk about how many people it takes to handle garden-style apartments, 27 members, for example. We don't have a high-rise, but 42 members. We have some buildings that are equally as challenging because of the square footage that a high-rise would have. It's just not that up. So I just wanted to show you that and also mention the rural water supply. And with that, I would like to thank the citizens of the county, the Board of Supervisors, our county leaders, our fire rescue staff. Special thanks to our business manager, Beth Campbell, who works hard to keep the budget in order for us, and all the support that we receive from you all. And I certainly would be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions for Chief Ferguson? I do have one question, Chief.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned the difficulty in accessing rural water supplies. Do the tank-based fire hydrants help that?
They do. I assume maybe you're talking about the ones that you see in the neighborhoods?
Right, I'm
the
thinking
underground
that it might be
cisterns?
hard to put a pump in a lake and get water out.
Right,
but-
so, yes, sir, it does. And those tanks in the ground usually consist of about 10,000 gallons at a minimum. And that will allow us to have that initial fire attack and that initial knockdown on that fire in that first 10 minutes or so. Now, that doesn't mean we won't seek another water supply that has more water, but if those that we see in the neighborhoods and subdivisions that don't have lakes and ponds and things like that, certainly can make a big impact in fire suppression. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Thank you, Chief, and thanks
you very
to
much.
all
Thank you for your
the
support.
guys for all that you do for us. Appreciate it. Next is animal protection. Mr. Clough.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to present the Animal Protection FY 2020 budget. Primary functions of animal protection are to respond to all calls for service related to domestic animals 365 days per year, to enforce all animal welfare ordinances of Goochland County and the state of Virginia, to prevent the spread of rabies to humans and domestic animals, to maintain the Goochland Animal Shelter, to reunite lost animals with their owner, and to find permanent homes for all adoptable animals. Agency goals: to continue to provide public safety services while striving to reduce response times, to continue to find forever homes for all adoptable animals entering the animal shelter, to continue to reduce the number of rabies incidents in domestic animals through education, law enforcement, and providing periodic low-cost rabies clinics, and to become operational in the new animal shelter facility summer of 2019. Some of the performance measures I wanted to show today, the first being animal intake. As you can see, our intake is actually down for FY 2018. I would like to think that the decrease is due to education and enforcement efforts, coupled with additional officers who have created a better awareness of not letting your animal run loose without identification. Our adoptions have increased by approximately 1% over the last 3 years, with a 37% adoption for FY 2018, and a total number of 181 animals. Another performance measure is the save rate percentage. That percentage is the total intake divided by the following dispositions, and they are reclaimed by an owner, transferred to a partnering private animal welfare organization, and adopted from the facility. As you can see from this chart, that save rate percentage increased by 2% to a total of 82% for FY 2018. We have a notice to comply program that is a written warning system where we try to get citizens into compliance for animal-related infractions. That number went up from 95 issued notice to complies to 119 in FY 2018. That's mainly due to the increased 5th officer that we got for FY 2018, which helped with issuing those notice to complies. Calls for service, we did have an increase in calls from service from 1,252 in 2017 to 1,421 in 2018. That was a 13.6% increase. However, due to the additional 5th officer, we had a decrease in the number of calls for service per officer, which did help with response times. Explanation of changes for FY19 to FY20. The first being personnel cost increase reflects the addition of 2 part-time shelter attendants to facilitate operations at the new animal shelter. Operating cost increase are related directly to the opening of the new animal shelter, with electric anticipated to be $32,400 and water sewer $5,160. Animal Protection's budget does include $15,000 in support funding for Goochland pet lovers. The support funding would be aimed at developing a volunteer system designed to augment shelter operations. As you can see, the personnel, there was a 10.5% increase for the 2 part-time positions. The operating cost increase is directly related to the electrical and water sewer services. CIP projects for animal protection is our new animal shelter and adoption center. We're really looking forward to moving into that facility this summer. Future outlooks and challenges. There's an increased expectation of services to include additional open hours at the animal shelter, an increased expectation of compliance with enforcement of local animal welfare ordinances, more stringent state mandates, and finally, volunteer engagement, retention, and training as it relates to shelter operations. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions for Mr. Clough?
Mr. Chairman, can I provide a piece of clarification as to Mr. Clough's budget? You saw it in Chief Ferguson's budget. There were, and I didn't clarify this in my earlier presentation, we have in your budgets that are coming in front of you, we no longer have a formal contributions budget. There were additional services that we are showing in individual budgets. So in Tim's, he shared the pet lovers. It's more of a purchase of service to support operations. We're no longer doing direct contributions. In Eddie's, he had shared with you with the helicopter service that's in his. You're going to see some of these in different budgets as they come before you, but you want, and we've shared, we can provide you a list of what they are throughout all of them, but it's no longer sort of centralized like it used to be. They're all done as more of a service agreement to provide a service that supports these functions as we move forward versus a direct contribution.
I know Mr. Lyle asked about the contribution, I guess, for Monacan Soil and Water. Is that going to show up?
It'll show up in community development's budget. And so while they'll still be providing similar service levels, and we always work with them, it's not under a sort of a separate list, but that can be provided.
Just one other thing. So how are these contributions comparing to last year, since they're showing new here?
The ones
generally?
You've seen so far, well, Eddie's was flat from prior year. Pet Lovers, it's hard to, this would be the first time because we're establishing that program. Pet Lovers was a little different. The last incentive we gave Pet Lovers was a cash match. So if they earned a certain amount of money, we would match it to with $100,000 for the shelter construction. This is changing. We're now building an operation. So we're moving out of that capital funding to more of an operational support. And our discussions with Pet Lovers, so if we went and purchased for $15,000, we'd get roughly 1,500 hours of service. We think we'll at least double that with our partnership with Pet Lovers. And so that it is a return on that investment with that particular project for us. And so good questions, and I'll make sure as we go through the other budgets, we'll pay a little more particular attention to that.
Makes total sense. Thank you.
Could you go back to slide 11, please? I'm sorry, 12. So thank you for that. That's what I'm looking for, a budget presentation. Thank you. So we're jumping The 436 in adopted 19 to 482, you said that jump is for the extra employee
Yes, sir, 2 part-time positions.
that are not starting or have already started?
They have not started. no.
Okay. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Can I just also clarify, again, I mentioned it earlier, Tim actually requested 4 positions, 2 full-time and 2 part-time. Given all of the collective priorities, we were only able to recommend the 2 part-time, and we believe the Pet Lovers Partnership should augment that as well.
And your comment there when you're wrapping up saying you're looking forward to moving into the new facility, you said this summer. I noticed that got a little reaction from people in the room. And so define summer and seriously, when do you really have does it look like you're getting to a date that you really think you're thinking might happen?
I can't say we've committed to a date, but we're certainly hoping to be in by August.
Oh, great. Okay. Good. I know that will be awesome.
Yes, sir.
If it just stops raining, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, exactly.
This week's not going to help things.
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clough, appreciate it. Ms. Parrish is next with workforce.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Badesky. I'm Kelly Parrish, Director of Human Resources, and it's my pleasure to present the workforce report. I'll be going over workforce statistics, benefits, compensation, position change requests, and the proposed budget. Let's start with some employment statistics. As of 12/31/18, we had 204 full-time employees and 32 part-time employees with a total workforce of 236. The slide breaks it down between county and constitutional staff. Our average salary was $54,911. Average age was 44 years old. Average years of service was 6. There are 152 males versus 84 females, and our minority rate is 11.9%, and this is up from 11.4% in 2017. In calendar year 2018, we posted 35 positions. This does not include the sheriff's office staff since they do their own recruiting. Out of those 35 positions posted, we received 700 applications and we hired 41 new employees. These 41 new employees include multiple hires for Parks and Recreation assistants, multiple hires for the firefighters, and also includes the sheriff's office personnel since we do their new hire processing.
Mr. Chairman, you posted 35 and hired 41?
Yes. Like I said, due to several hires for firefighters,
Okay.
as well as several hires for one position for our part-time recreation assistants.
So any particular posting might be for a firefighter position, and you might get multiple hires out of that one posting.
Correct.
Thank you so
Correct.
much.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
No problem.
Good question.
The county had 33 separations in calendar year 2018. 28 were full-time and 5 were part-time, for a turnover rate of 14%, and this is up from 12.3% in 2017, and mostly due to retirements and folks moving on to different or other employment positions. These are the turnover rates for other localities. They show increases as well. Their average approximately went up about 10% from last year. Let's switch to benefits. 90% of our workforce are enrolled in our health insurance plan. We're expecting a 2.41% increase for fiscal year 20 in costs, and we're recommending to hold the employee premiums constant. Let's talk about compensation. This is a 5-year merit increase comparison with their other localities. As you can see, we have been holding constant at 2% for the past few years. This also shows that Louisa, Henrico, and Chesterfield gave above a 2% merit increase last year. The slide just shows their merit increase history over the past 10 years. Looking at national merit increases, some leading research companies reported the following merit increases in 2018, with an average increase of 2.98%, and they're predicting an average merit increase of 3.1% for this year. Our surrounding jurisdictions are projecting the following merit increases for their localities. Most are following the trend and giving a 3% increase, and that's what we are also recommending as well. In addition to merits, we also wish to stay competitive with compensation. We did a benchmark salary survey in 2017, and we gathered data from 6 jurisdictions: Chesterfield, Hanover, Henrico, Louisa, New Kent, and Powhatan. We're on the 3rd year of these salary adjustments, and we're asking for $42,500 to be budgeted for year 3 of the benchmark adjustments. And a new benchmark study will be conducted in fiscal year 20. On to fiscal year 20 staffing requests and recommendations. Mr. Badesky highlighted this in his presentation, so I'll briefly go over it as well. Staff has recommended a total of 8 part-time positions for 2020. County Administrator is recommending 6. As well, for full-time staff recommendations, there were 16. The County Administrator is recommending 12, for a total of 18 positions recommended. And I'll go over them in further detail in just a moment. But first, I wanted to show you the 5-year staffing requests. There are a total of 12 part-time positions being requested over the next 5 years, as well as 49 full-time positions being requested, for a grand total of 61 positions over the next 5 years. Back to our fiscal year 20 recommendations. There are 10 new positions recommended in public safety: 7 firefighters and fire EMS, 1 crime analyst in the sheriff's office, and 2 part-time animal shelter attendants and animal protection. There are also 2 new positions recommended in utilities: a utilities construction superintendent and a utility locator. And both of these positions are fee supported. There is 1 new position recommended in community development. It's a residential plans examiner and building inspections, and this is also fee supported. There are 5 additional recommendations for fiscal year 20. A conversion of 1 part-time deputy treasurer position to a full-time position in the treasurer's office. 1 new part-time recreation assistant in Parks and Recreation, and this position is fee supported. 1 new part-time administrative assistant in the assessor's office. 1 new part-time programmer in information technology, and 1 new part-time attendant at the convenience center. To recap the recommendations, there are 11 new full-time positions, 6 new part-time positions, plus 1 conversion from part-time to full-time, with these increases totaling $869,071 and a 3% merit increase at $480,000. And the benchmark adjustments at $42,500, for a total just under $1.4 million. And these totals do include benefit costs as well. And this is further broken down between the general fund and the utilities fund.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, Ms. Parrish, on this, you mentioned some of these positions were fee supported. Mm-hmm. Is this net of the fees, or is this gross?
It's gross.
So these costs in the presentation seem like would be at least partially offset by the fees that support
Correct.
them?
Yes.
Are we going to see those numbers later, or is that? Anyway, it's just a quad. I see these numbers. I just want to know what the net is. If we can get those numbers, that would be great.
When we do the departmental, we'll
That's
give you
fine.
the further breakdown.
That's fine. Thank you.
Phrased another way, may I ask? Phrased another way, I had a similar question. When you cite something as being fee supported, should we generally assume that that you expect it to be fully fee supported, or does the fee partly support that position? I know it's not a hard and fast rule, but will you generally expect those positions to be fully funded with fees?
That is accurate for the utilities position. It's accurate for the building officials position. Parks and Rec is somewhat program revenue dependent, but we do anticipate that is primarily offset. But on the Parks and Rec one, I don't want to tell you it's always 100%, but it's projected to be revenue generating.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Pardon?
if you don't mind, just while we're still here, 869,071 for the 11, for all the new positions, that includes benefits, that's salary and benefits.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So in conclusion, we believe the proposed fiscal year 20 budget demonstrates our ability to invest in our workforce and meet increased service demands. And we thank you for your continued support, and I'd be happy to answer any additional questions that you might have.
Any other questions? I have one, and that may be more for John, but the part-time person for the convenience center, does that, I don't remember when we discussed it, does that keep the Western Convenience Center open on Wednesdays?
What you have in front of you keeps both of them open on non-traditional days. We have not increased Wednesday service levels in what you have in front of you. When we get to that part of general services, they will be prepared with a number for you, should you want to make an amendment of some nature.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Parrish?
No. Thank you.
No? John?
Well, I was just trying to do the math real quickly, but so in your chart on 15, with the FY20 staffing request, that 24 should equal all the positions that you have in the remaining slide. 10 in public safety, 2 in utilities, 1, 5, that's 3, 13, 18.
Right, that should equal all of the positions in fiscal year 20 that were requested.
Gotcha. And then 21, 22, 23, 24, we can kind of just use that as to get an idea of what you anticipate our needs being. And this is obviously driven by what you see the departments requesting.
What the departments have requested, yes.
Okay, thank you. Good,
oh, sure.
Good information.
Can I just clarify that question a little bit more? One thing should be noted, and it appears that we may have a new sheriff budget time next year. He withdrew his request, and his plan actually had more numbers in it in prior years. You may see that change in future years.
Well, every constitutional officer,
certainly,
you know.
Certainly. I only stated that one because all of the existing constitutional officers that I at least know of, maybe back, have included 5-year plans in their requests.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Thank you.
No more questions? Thank you, Ms. Parrish.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, evening almost, members of the board, Mr. Chairman. My section of this presentation is very brief.
But you're going to make us do work.
So what I'm here tonight to ask you to do is to request the public hearings that are involved. I'm going to request you set the public hearings that are involved in the budget process and authorize to advertise those public hearings. So for April 2nd, we have planned 3 public hearings. The first request is the public hearing on the real property tax rate. The state code requires us to have a separate public hearing, and they also require us to advertise the effective tax rate, which you'll see in your packet. This year's calculation came out to the effective tax rate being 50 cents per $100 in value. We are advertising a tax rate of 53 cents per $100, And as Mr. Badesky mentioned earlier, we can set, you can ultimately adopt a lower rate and not a higher rate than the 53 cents. So I'm here to request to set a public hearing for April 2nd on the real property tax rate.
So questions for Ms. Horlacher? No questions?
Mr. Chairman, we need a motion, right? Mr. Chairman, I move that we set a public hearing at 7 p.m. on April 2nd in this boardroom to address the real property tax rate. And do you need us to do you need the motion to include an authorization of an advertisement?
Advertise for
Yes,
such.
and to authorize advertising a proposed rate of 53 cents per 100 for the real property tax rate.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any additional discussion? Okay, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
The second request I have tonight is a request to set a public hearing, again, for April 2nd. And this is on the numerous changes that will be made to current ordinances and also the new Appendix C that will be set up that will include our fee schedule. And I'm not going to read all the changes. Your packet, you have a lot of strikeouts that show all these changes. And this is, again, as Mr. Badesky mentioned in his presentation, an effort to make this a little more clear, a little more transparent. There will be a lot of changes in order to set up that fee schedule that will show all of our fees. And again, I'm asking to set a public hearing for April 2nd on all these fee and ordinance changes.
Okay.
And are there any questions?
Any questions or comments on the actual fees or?
Yeah, we'll be going over the fees more in detail
Right.
as we get through the presentation.
Right. So, no questions. Do we have a motion to set the public hearing on April 2nd on an ordinance to repeal and amend various ordinances related to fees and to adopt a county fee schedule as Appendix C of the Goochland County Code?
Second.
I'm asking for a motion. So, are you moving it?
Yes, I moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
And the third request I have is, as I mentioned, the state code requires a separate public hearing on the real estate tax rate. So we will also have a third public hearing on April 2nd, which will include everything else. It's a catch-all, it's everything. It's the proposed budget, it'll include the school's proposed budget, it will include the CIP, all 25 years of it. You will only adopt 1 year and approve 24 other years, and then all the other tax rates that we have discussed a little bit tonight, but again, we'll go through in following presentations. So I'm requesting that we set that public hearing and also advertise for that public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we set a public hearing at 7 p.m. on April 2nd, 2019 in this boardroom, and also that we advertise that public hearing, direct the county administrator to advertise the public hearing as required by law for the purposes of discussing and opening discussion to the public of the county administrator's FY20 budget, proposed budget, the school division's proposed budget, the FY 2022 through 2044 capital improvement program, of course, only for the adoption of the first year.
Correct.
And then all the other tax rates other than the real estate tax rate, which I think we addressed in a separate motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any Discussion?
Mr. Chairman, just, I'm not sure I heard the beginning. That is also to advertise, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, good.
So all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, can I just clarify on item 4 that you just voted on prior to this one? I'm not sure if your motion fully included the advertisement piece. Don't want to split hairs. Just
I see someone in the audience saying no.
Tara,
So,
Other than that specific request to advertise the 53-cent tax rate, I'm not sure that the other one is an ordinance amendment in the middle, so I don't think it needs a specific request to advertise.
Good.
I certainly wouldn't jump in the way if the board wants to do that, but I think it's the rates that has that specific authority to advertise.
we're good?
We're good.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we are expecting, and the forecast appears that we are going to experience some pretty severe weather overnight. I don't want to begin to assume to be a weather forecaster, but we always err on the side of caution. Goochland County Public Schools have delayed 2 hours tomorrow. Goochland County government will be delayed 2 hours tomorrow. That'll be going out to the public. Mr. Stamey, Chief Ferguson, and I will be up bright and early to reevaluate that and try to see how the conditions are actually on the ground first thing in the morning and make a further determination at that point.
Mr. Peterson, did you
Yeah,
have a
Mr.
comment?
Chair, if I could, Mr. Badesky and Ms. Horlacher, maybe if you can work with her on this. Since there is a, what I'll call revenue neutral number being calculated here as well, it would be helpful for me to, as I answer questions about that, if we had, say, starting in 2007, if we had the revenues from 2007, and then each year subsequent to that, if we had population change and inflation change year over year, what the revenue neutral number would have been each year, so we can kind of get a feel for where we would be truly revenue neutral back to that original date, and then all of the effective cuts during those years, what that accumulated, so that we know where we stand on a cumulative basis, whether we're revenue neutral or not. That would be helpful for me to be able to answer questions that come up. So,
Mr. Peterson, I think we have that work product, Mr. Horlacher, Ms. Horlacher. I believe we can build upon what we have to address that.
that would be helpful if you could. So, thank you.
Any other comments, or if not, I'll go ahead and adjourn. All right, so you've heard the first step in the budget process. A lot of information. It's going to be more over the next few weeks. So Tuesday, February 26th at 3 p.m. We have a budget session. So we're adjourning this meeting to that meeting, and that'll have some revenue presentation. So you'll hear the good news. And then again, the meeting's open to the public. On March 5th is our regular meeting at 3 p.m. We'll have a regular business meeting, and that's when we'll get the school board budget presentation and request. And then at 7 p.m. we will have our public hearings. I think we have a pretty full agenda, so be a good meeting to attend if you can. Tuesday, March 12th, we will go over the capital improvement program, and we'll have the work session with the Board of Supervisors and the school board members to discuss all of these budget issues. And that meeting's again open to the public. On April 2nd, we will have a regular meeting at 3 p.m. and the 7 p.m. public hearings, and that'll include all the budget public hearings. And again, all these meetings are open to the public. And in between that, we'll have all the town hall meetings I announced earlier. So I look forward to seeing you all at one of those. So we will adjourn to February 26th.